happy Monday, David Wojnicki.
Oh, Jason, good to be back together again.
How are
Feels
you?
like only yesterday we saw each other.
Yes, it was. How was your week?
It was a good week. Overall, my daughter, who's up at college, came back for a few days, and so crazy enough, you know, you're getting older when your daughter is a bridesmaid in a wedding. And
Wow.
So that's kind of crazy. But we were glad to see her. How about you guys? How was your week?
No, it's actually pretty relaxing. A lot of things that we normally have scheduled got canceled or we had the week off, so we just kind of chilled. And Texas Rangers right now undefeated in postseason, so it'd be nice if they kept that up, but we'll see.
So happy for you. So happy for you, Rangers.
Hey, yesterday, of course, was worship. We got to be gathered together to glorify God for who He is, what He has done. Sweet time. Loved watching Romy in the second service, getting baptized, hearing her testimony. It was so beautiful, so sweet. Something else yesterday, you had your Israel meeting. And we announced a couple of weeks ago that there's going to be an Israel trip next fall, 2024.
Right.
And of course, there's a lot going on right now with the war, the chaos going on there. So one question I have for you, what is supposed to be our view as the church of what's going on in Israel right now? How are we supposed to process that?
There's a lot. You know, last week when we did this, the news had just hit over the weekend, and we're quite ready yet to kind of talk about some of those things. And even now, you know, how do we process this? It was crazy. It was, you know, 3 weeks ago we said, hey, we're excited. We're gonna, you know, do another trip to Israel in 2024. It's one of the things I love being able to lead and to do. And then it was 2 weeks after that the attack happened out of the Gaza Strip by Hamas. And you know, just geopolitically, just for a moment, listen, there's a lot that can be said. You know, having been to Israel a couple of times now, knowing the geography, knowing the things, you know, when you look at the map, you know, what you have going on predominantly, and I'm not going to get into who's funding who and all those things, but the attack out of the Gaza Strip is way down in the southwest of Israel, right? It's on the Mediterranean Sea, it's in the southwest, and it's this confined space. There's literally this huge fence that goes all the way around it, and you know, when Hamas attacked, you know, it wasn't as though they tried to make an incursion into the entire nation of Israel. In fact, I showed at the Israel trip meeting, I said, here's all the places that we visit. And it's all these blue dots all over the country. There's like 40 dots. And then way down in the corner, you see where the Gaza Strip is. And I said, you have to understand this is it's a localized thing right now. Yes, they might be getting international support, Hamas, to do this, but it was a terrorist attack. It was their 9/11. And you know, this is a tale as old as time. You know, it goes all the way back to you know, the Arab and the Jewish people, you know, Jacob and Esau and the conflict. And so how do we think about this biblically? It is a tale as old as time. God had said that, you know, his chosen people would come from Jacob's line. And that there would be strife between the two brothers and their offspring. And so to this day, you know, is this a sign of the end times? Is this a sign of, you know, Jesus coming back? Here's what I'll say. Jesus said that between his first coming and his second coming, there would be wars and rumors of wars, and there would be death, and there would be famine, there'd be all these things. And it's so sad what's taken place there. And the attack was unwarranted, but it's an example that we live in a fallen world. And so I'm not quick to assign any kind of prophecy to this. I'm quick to say, no, this is exactly what Jesus said would happen until he comes back and establishes his reign forever. And we're going to talk about the Davidic Covenant in a minute, but I think that's what you see taking place. So.
Yeah, you said the Davidic Covenant. Yesterday we looked at Luke 1:57 following. And as you're talking about Israel, I'm thinking about you spoke yesterday on God's power and faithfulness. Like it's still there, it's still going amidst all this. But yesterday we covered specifically the birth of John and what it shows us about God. Correct? We did talk about the Davidic Covenant. We also talked about that we receive salvation and redemption from the captivity of sin and the power of sin. So as you prepare, by the way, still enjoying Luke, always enjoying it. You look like you're having a fun time as you're teaching this. What stood out to you as you prepared for this message?
You know, as we're looking at this, I opened my message with something that I found, you know, so fascinating. Modern historians, when they're writing biographies, go out of their way to set the context for the people that they're writing about. I mean, I see that in all of the, you look and you find exceptions, yes, you can, but I mean, modern historians, they do this, and they believe it's beneficial for you as a reader to get that before you get to the main person. And what do we see in Luke? Like, Luke is doing this as an ancient historian, 2,000 years before any of these guys are writing. The modern historians are actually following the pattern that we see here in Luke's gospel. And so this discussion about the birth of John the Baptist, like, it's huge. The Messiah would not come until the forerunner, the prophet that Malachi said would come to make straight the way for the coming of the Messiah. And so, I mean, Jason, one of the things that as I'm just becoming more and more convinced, like, Jesus, I should say becoming more and more, I've always believed this, but it's refreshing my heart. Like, Jesus is the fulfillment. We're not looking for anyone else. And one of the things that stands out to me is, with John's coming, this is what Zechariah understood. I said it in the message. Zechariah spoke as though all the promises of God were already fulfilled.
Yes.
Because in his mind, with his son being born, the plan of God is in full motion. And once God's plan is in motion, it's fulfilled. Is there more to come? Are there some things that God is still going to be doing through Jesus Christ in the future age? Yes. But what Luke proclaims is we need to be viewing Jesus' coming as changing the world today, changing our lives today. And that we need to speak like Zechariah speaks. God has redeemed. God has saved. He has visited his people. And live in those truths in their fullness, even right now. So that's one of the kind of the big things that just kind of stood out to me is that as we kind of start.
Something a little bit more deeper theological.
Sure.
You talked about the Davidic Covenant, and you had a graphic for us that had covenants listed up there. There's a lot there. There's a lot there. So knowing your time constraints on Sunday morning, is there more that you want to share about covenants?
So I was telling my wife just yesterday, I came to think maybe Thursday or Friday, and originally this was going to be just one message. I was going to do all of Zechariah's.
Thank you for splitting that.
Yeah, no, really, because I looked at it and I'm just like, how often do we talk about the Davidic Covenant?
Yes.
How often does it come up in the text? It's so important because Zechariah says Jesus fulfills 2 covenants, very specifically. And there's a potential third. I'm going to talk about that on Sunday.
Okay.
But, the Davidic Covenant and the Abrahamic Covenant. And we just don't, I don't think the church often, we get so focused on the New Testament, at least in America sometimes, that we don't consider that Jesus, why it's so significant that he's fulfilling these Old Testament promises. And each one of the covenants that we showed yesterday, like, they're so deep. They each are intended to communicate something else. But what you see with all the covenants is there's a starting broad and then this narrowing and this focusing. And the promise that was made to David with the Davidic Covenant, things that we weren't able to talk about. It was in my notes, but I'm just like, I don't have time. David came to the Lord in prayer, and he said, I want to build a house for your name. And God says, you're not going to build a house for me. Your son's going to. But instead of you building a house for me, I'm going to build a house for you. And the purpose of me establishing your house, i.e. your line, is so that through you now, David, that's where the promised Messiah is going to come. So he started broad with Abraham. He said, through you, generally speaking, the nations will be blessed. Someone's going to come. And then it comes to David, and it gets even more specific. Now we know it's going to come through the house of David. But in its context, David was saying, Lord, I want to build you a house for all that you've done for me. And he says, no, you're not going to build me a house. Your son will do it. But even more importantly, I'm going to build you a house. Because, see, God's not about, boy, can I get in trouble for saying this? What I'm about to say, okay. It's like we get so focused on the temple. We get so focused on the land of Israel and all those kind of things. God is like, it's all mine. It's all mine. And it's like, yes, I want you to build the temple because that's going to be the place where people will gather. But all of those things, the temple, the land, the people, it's all pointing to Jesus. And so that's what we showed in those covenants. Every single covenant is pointing to its fulfillment in Jesus.
You mean like he's the point of the story?
He's the point of the story. He's the point of the story. And so one thing I tried to emphasize yesterday is it helps us. It helps us as God's people to know the Old Testament from the sense of it helps us to understand what Christ is actually fulfilling and what is fulfilled now because of his. And that's where, redemption and salvation. Yeah. That is why it's so important for the Davidic Covenant to be fulfilled. Because if Jesus isn't the king over all things, then you and I are still enslaved to somebody else.
Yes.
Or we have the potential of still being under the bondage. But if Jesus is a king over all things, we've been set free, not partially, but completely. And that's what he says here. He's like, we have been saved. And from a practical standpoint, why do you emphasize this? It's like, because we've been bought back. We're no longer slaves. The entire New Testament then is like, because he's the Davidic king, because he's the rescuer who came, because he's the king who's on his throne. You and I have salvation today. No longer captives to sin. And so I think that's so significant. And
Great news.
Yeah, and what we're going to see next, or on Sundays, we're going to see why the fulfillment of the Abrahamic covenant is fulfilled. Here's what I'll just give you a little taste.
Please do.
Because, so the fulfillment of the Davidic covenant, it has to do with our situation or our condition. Okay? You were enslaved to sin. You need a king who will conquer those foes. The Abrahamic covenant is about the change of identity.
Okay.
It's about the change of identity. So condition, so you've been set free from the power of sin over you. The Abrahamic covenant, we're going to talk about how its fulfillment touches our very identity. And so that's
which is still confusion in the church a lot even today. What is our true identity? What do we recognize as?
Yeah.
We know we're in Christ, but we still identify many times unknowingly, falsely.
Right.
In that. So
So that'll be but it'll make sense. Then you'll be like, oh, that's why Zechariah emphasizes that Jesus fulfills the Davidic and the Abrahamic. He wants us to see our condition has changed and our identity has changed.
That's so great.
Yeah, good news.
And you said there's a lot there in the covenant, so not asking you for commitment. Maybe one day there's some classes that could help people dive into that or something around here. I don't know. I'm just
I think we haven't talked about this. So I'll just be brief. You hear me say it all the time. Well, I'll come into your office and I'll be like, man, I wish I was teaching on this and not preaching on this.
Okay.
And people might say, what do you mean by that? You do teach, and you're just like, there's a difference when I'm preaching.
Yes.
I'm trying to communicate information in such a way, proclaiming the word of God, versus like when I'm teaching, it's just kind of it's like breaking down more of the details in such a way that just helps to inform, rather than transform. And it's not to say that you can't do both on a Sunday, and I try and do that, but sometimes it's like, oh, let's just talk about this for a while.
Yes. Great.
Yeah.
Cool.
So those are the things.
Wonderful. Okay. Anything else on that?
No. That's
all right. I've asked you a question each week.
Yeah.
One was fall. One was sports.
So I got a question for you this week.
Go for it.
God is doing great, marvelous things in our lives always, and we rejoice in that. One of the good gifts that God gives us is food, and
yes,
we talk a lot about food during a given week. Part of it is you have some. I know the church knows you have some dietary restrictions. And things, but I know you love food, and you're a good old Texas
from the
boy.
South. Yes, food is a big deal.
So I'm not going to say what's your last meal, but what is it that the church might be surprised or something? It's like, I really enjoy.
Well, okay, let me tell you what. Yesterday we watched the Rangers win. Yay!
Again.
My wife made some. She is a great cook, and she knows since my food's so limited, she finds recipes I can eat. I grew up eating pimento cheese. Mm-hmm. Anyway, she makes a clean version, but it beats any store-bought pimento cheese ever. I love it. This stuff is amazing. But actually, you told me a week or two ago I should try putting it on chicken.
Yeah.
I've never done that. I've always eaten with crackers or bread.
Right.
So yesterday we grilled some chicken. Put that pimento cheese on that chicken. I'm gonna tell you, that was a good call, Dave. That was some good stuff right there.
And you literally exclaimed. What did you exclaim after you had eaten it?
I said, that is stupidly good. It was so good.
No, I didn't make it. I just suggested.
He suggested. So
I mean, I'm with that. That's some good stuff.
How about you?
Yeah. So I mean, I love all kind of food. I love very flavorful food.
Yeah.
And I think something that surprises my wife. I have different palates. When we drove. Your wife and I actually have some similar palates on things, and so. One of the things I think surprises people is I love me some good Thai food.
She likes Thai food. I'm not so much there, but go ahead.
And so I mean, like I love everything. I mean, just across the board. But recently, when I've got the opportunity to take somebody out to lunch or something like that, because my wife's not a big fan, I'll be like, hey, you want to meet for lunch? And then we'll go to because I love the flavor and the spices. I think one of the funny stories, we had a staff retreat one time. and we all ordered food. And, we went to different places. And so, your wife and I were the only two that wanted Thai. So we got the takeout.
Yes.
I brought it back, and they asked us how spicy we wanted it.
Yes.
And we were both like, we like a little spicy. So we asked them to do a 6.
Yeah.
Little did we know that their scale was from 1 to 6.
Yeah, as opposed to
as
what,
1 to 10. And we're like, who does that?
Yes.
And but we braved it. You guys were all enjoying your food, and your wife and I had tears in our eyes.
I did take a bite of that one. It was spicy. I enjoy spicy, but that was spicy.
Yeah, God's goodness, right? Variety, I think so.
Well, thanks for chatting with me.
Yeah,
Thanks for
good.
listening, church family,
Yeah, appreciate it.
and we will see you next week.
Yep.